students. Hello. Right. Okay. Now, one thing I'm going to do. Let's have a look. Okay. And of course, The Order of the Phoenix is an amazing novel. It is a literal house brick. My goodness, have a look at that. Okay, have a look at that. And of course, this is when we're looking at it. This is J.K. Rowling's 5th novel, and my goodness, did she get into the swing of things with this one? This one is literally, my goodness, 707. Imagine, guys, 766 pages of writing. Okay, and not just any old writing, J.K. Rowling writing. Okay, which is incredible, and it's a very. It takes us into it, okay? Because looking at Harry Potter, remember, when we're looking at the Order of the Phoenix, okay? Harry started at 11 years of age with the Philosopher's Stone. Then he was 12 years of age with the Chamber of Secrets, 13 with the Prisoner of Azkaban. We've just finished the Goblet of Fire, where he was 14. Okay, and now he is now almost 15 years of age. Okay, he is just about to turn 15. Hello. Good morning. Welcome. Okay, so we can begin now. Can't wait. Okay, now Harry is 15 years of age, and it is his amazing time. It's his amazing time at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. This was published in 2000. This novel was published in 2003, and my goodness, I still remember. Hello. I still remember like it was yesterday. Right. Okay. Let's have a look. 800. Yes. Okay. Now, well, it depends on. Yeah, mine is. Let's have a look. This is the 800. Wow. Now mine is the Bloomsbury. Mine is the Bloomsbury edition of 2003, which was published in the UK. And there are some that are published with bigger typeface. Okay, which and it's really nice. A lot of the newer versions of the Order of the Phoenix have double spacing or 1.5 line spacing between each one, and they have also larger font. So it depends on which version you get, but this one, the 2003, have a look at this. My goodness. Now that is real J.K. Rowling writing. Okay, there's that perspective. Right, are we ready? Yes, perfect. Okay. Now there's enough gas in my charger. And we are ready to go. Let's have a look. Okay, let's have a look. Okay, this one, published in Great Britain, published in Great Britain in 2003, Bloomsbury Publishing. Acknowledgements to Neil, Jessica, and David, who make my world magical. Okay. Her husband and her children. Let's start. Hang on, just get a coffee. Get a bit of coffee into me. Okay. Now we begin this extraordinary novel. Chapter 1. Dudley Demented. The hottest day of the summer so far was drawing to a close, and a drowsy silence lay over the large, square houses of Privet Drive. Cars that were usually gleaming stood dusty in their drives, and lawns that were once emerald green lay parched and yellowing, for the use of house pipes had been banned due to the drought. Deprived of their usual car washing and lawn mowing pursuits, the inhabitants of Privet Drive had retreated into the shade of their cool houses, windows thrown wide in the hope of tempting a non-existent breeze. The only person left outdoors was a teenage boy, who was lying flat on his back in a flower bed outside number 4. He was skinny, black-haired, bespectacled boy who had the pinched, slightly unhealthy look of someone who has grown a lot in a short space of time. His jeans were torn and dirty, his t-shirt baggy and faded, and the soles of his trainers were peeling away from the uppers. Harry Potter's appearance did not endear him to the neighbours, who were the sort of people who thought scruffiness ought to be punishable by law. But as he had hidden himself behind a large hydrangea bush, this evening he was quite invisible to passers-by. In fact, the only way he would be spotted was if Uncle Vernon or Aunt Petunia stuck their heads out of the living room window and looked straight down into the flower bed below. On the whole, Harry thought he was to be congratulated on his idea of hiding there. He was not, perhaps, very comfortable lying on the hot, hard earth, but, on the other hand, nobody was glaring at him, grinding their teeth so loudly that he could not hear the news, or shooting nasty questions at him, as he happened every time to have tried sitting down in the living room to watch television with his aunt and uncle. Almost as though this thought had fluttered through the open window, Vernon Dursley, Harry's uncle, suddenly spoke. "Glad to see the boy stopped trying to butt in. Where is he anyway?" "I don't know," said Aunt Petunia, unconcerned. "Not in the house." Uncle Vernon grunted. "Watching the news," he said scathingly. "I'd like to know what he's really up to. As if a boy cares what's on the news. Dudley hasn't got a clue what's going on. Doubt he knows who the Prime Minister is. Anyway, it's not as if there'd be anything about his lot on our news." "Vernon, shh," said Aunt Petunia. "The window's open." "Oh yes, sorry dear." The Dursleys fell silent. Harry listened to a jingle about fruit and bran breakfast cereal while he watched Mrs. Figg, a batty, cat-loving old lady by a nearby Wisteria Walk, amble slowly past. She was frowning and muttering to herself. Harry was very pleased he was concealed behind the bush, as Mrs. Figg had recently taken to asking him round for tea whenever she met him in the street. She had rounded the corner and vanished from view before Uncle Vernon's voice floated out of the window again. "Dudda's out for tea?" "At the Polkses'," said Aunt Petunia loud fondly. "He's got so many little friends. He's so popular." Harry suppressed a snort with difficulty. The Dursleys really were astonishingly stupid about their son, Dudley. They had swallowed all his dim-witted lies about having tea with different members of his gang every night of the summer holidays. Harry and his gang spent every evening vandalising the play park, smoking on street corners and throwing stones at passing cars and children. Harry had seen them at it during his evening walks around Little White Whinging. I pronounce it whinging. He had spent most of the holidays wandering the streets, scavenging newspapers from bins along the way. The opening notes of the music that heralded the 7 o'clock news reached Harry's ears and his stomach turned over. Perhaps tonight, perhaps after a month of waiting, would be the night. Record numbers of stranded holidaymakers fill airports as the Spanish bag handler strike reaches its second week. "Give 'em a lifetime siesta, I would," snarled Uncle Vernon over the end of the newsreader's sentence. But no matter, outside in the flower bed, Harry's stomach seemed to unclench. If anything had happened, it would surely be the first item on the news. Death and destruction were more important than stranded holiday makers. He let out a long, slow breath and stared up at the brilliant blue sky. Every day this summer had been the same. The tension, the expectation, the temporary relief, and then mounting tension again. And always growing more insistent all the time, the question of why nothing had happened yet. He kept listening, just in case there was some small clue not recognised for what it really was by the Muggles. An unexplained disappearance, perhaps, or some strange accident. But the baggage handler's strike was followed by news about the drought in the southeast. "I hope he's listening next door," bellowed Uncle Vernon, him with his sprinklers on at 3 in the morning. Then a helicopter that almost crashed in a field in Surrey. Then a famous actress's divorce from her famous husband. "As if we're interested in their sordid affairs," sniffled Aunt Petunia, who had followed the case obsessively in every magazine she could lay her bony hands on. "Ah. Now, there is one thing that I want you to do. There's one thing I want you to think about, and that is all of the negative vocabulary that Harry has, that J.K. Rowling has attributed to the characters of the Dursley family. Okay? Why? Because they belong over here in the antagonists file. And that means that all of the vocabulary that is attached to them that explains them or who they are or what they look like is not very nice. Not very nice at all. Okay? Taking it on the previous page. Okay? What did J.K. Rowling write about the Dursleys? The Dursleys really were astonishingly stupid about their son. They had swallowed all his dim-witted lies about having tea with different members of his gang every night. Okay, so basically, they are not very intelligent. According to that, they are not very intelligent and they're gullible about their son. And when we're looking at, so remember that when we're looking at it, okay? But why? Because there are so many there are not very nice descriptions of the Dursleys. The adverbs and the adjectives are not nice at all. Let's have a look. Harry closed his eyes again, the now blazing evening sky, as the newsreader said, and finally Bungie the Budgie has found a novel way of keeping cool this summer. Bungie, who lives at the Five Feathers in Barnsley, has learned to water ski. Mary Dawkins went out to find more. Harry opened his eyes. If they had reached the water skiing budgerigars, there would be nothing else worth hearing. He rolled cautiously onto his front and raised himself onto his knees and elbows, preparing to crawl out from under the window. He had moved about 2 inches when several things happened in quick succession. A loud, echoing crack broke the sleepy silence like a gunshot. A cat streaked out from under a parked car and flew out of sight. A shriek, a bellowed oath, and the sound of breaking china came from the Dursleys' living room. And, as though this was the signal Harry had been waiting for, he jumped to his feet, at the same time pulling from his waistband of his jeans a thin wooden wand as if he was unsheathing a sword. But before he could draw himself up to the full height, the top of his head collided with the Dursleys' open window. The resulting crash made Aunt Petunia scream even louder. Harry felt as though his head had been split in two. Eyes streaming, he swayed, trying to focus on the street to spot the source of the noise. But he had barely staggered upright when 2 large purple hands reached through the open window and closed tightly around his throat. "Put it away!" Uncle Vernon snarled into Harry's ear. "Now, before anyone sees." "Get off me!" Harry gasped. For a few seconds they struggled, Harry pulling at his uncle's sausage-like fingers with his left hand, his right maintaining a firm grip on his raised wand. Then, as the pain in the top of Harry's head gave a particularly nasty throb, Uncle Vernon yelped and released Harry as though he had received an electric shock. Some invisible force seemed to have surged through his nephew, making him impossible to hold. Panting, Harry fell forwards over the hydrangea bush, straightened up and stared around. There was no sign of what had caused the long cracking noise. But there were several faces peering through various nearby windows. Harry stuffed his wand hastily back into his jeans and tried to look innocent. "Lovely evening," shouted Uncle Vernon, waving at Mrs. Number 7 opposite, who was glaring from behind her near net curtains. "Did you hear that car backfire just now? Gave Petunia and me quite a turn." He continued to grin in a horrible, maniac way until all the curious neighbours had disappeared from their various windows. Then the grin became a grimace of rage as he beckoned Harry towards him. Harry moved a few steps closer, taking care to stop just short of the point where Uncle Vernon's outstretched hands could resume their strangling. "What the devil do you mean by it, boy?" asked Uncle Vernon in a croaky voice that trembled with fury. "What do I mean by what?" said Harry coldly. He kept looking left and right up the street, still hoping to see the person who had made the cracking noise, making a racket like a starting pistol right outside our... "I didn't make that noise," said Harry firmly. Aunt Petunia's thin, horsey face now appeared beside Uncle Vernon's wide purple one. She looked livid. "Why were you lurking under our window?" Yes, Good point, Petunia. What were you doing under our window, boy? Listening to the news, said Harry in a resigned voice. His aunt and uncle exchanged looks of outrage. Listening to the news again? Well, it changes every day, don't you see? Don't be clever with me, boy. I want to know what you're really up to, and don't give me any more of this listening to the news tosh. You know perfectly well that your lot... Careful, Vernon, breathed Aunt Petunia, and Uncle Vernon lowered his voice so that Harry could barely hear him. That your lot don't get on our news. That's all you know, said Harry. The Dursleys goggled at him for a few seconds. Then Aunt Petunia said, "You're a nasty little liar. What are all of those?" She too lowered her voice so that Harry had to lip-read the next word. "Owls doing if they're not bringing you news." "Aha," said Uncle Vernon in a triumphant whisper. "Get out of that one, boy. As if we didn't know what you get all your news from, those pestilent birds." Harry hesitated for a moment. It cost him something to tell the truth this time, even though his aunt and uncle could not possibly know how bad he felt at admitting it. The owls aren't bringing news, he said tonelessly. "I don't believe it," said Aunt Petunia at once. "No more do I," said Uncle Vernon forcefully. "We know you're up to something funny," said Aunt Petunia. "We're not stupid, you know," said Uncle Vernon. "Well, that's news to me," said Harry. Oh, his temper rising, and before the Dursleys could call him back, he had wheeled about, crossed the front lawn, stepped over the low garden wall, and was striding off up the street. He was in trouble now, and he knew it. He would have to face his aunt and uncle later and pay the price for his rudeness. But he did not care very much just at the moment. He had much more pressing matters on his mind. Harry was sure the cracking noise had been made by someone apparating or disapparating. It was exactly the sound Dobby the house elf made when he vanished into thin air. Was it possible that Dobby was here in Privet Drive? Could Dobby be following him right at this very moment? As this thought occurred, he wheeled around and stared back down Privet Drive. But it appeared to be completely deserted, and Harry was sure that Dobby did not know how to become invisible. He walked on, hardly aware of the route he was taking, for he had pounded the streets so often lately that his feet carried him to his favourite haunts automatically. Every few steps he glanced back over his shoulder. Someone magical had been near him as he lay among Aunt Petunia's dying begonias. He was sure of it. Why hadn't they spoken to him? Why hadn't they made contact? Why were they hiding now? And then, as his feeling of frustration peaked, his certainty leaked away. Perhaps it hadn't been a magical sound after all. Perhaps he was so desperate for the tiniest sign of contact from the world to which he belonged that he was simply overreacting to perfectly ordinary noises. Could he be sure it hadn't been the sound of something breaking inside a neighbour's house? Harry felt a dull, sinking sensation in his stomach, and before he knew it, the feeling of hopelessness that had plagued him all summer rolled over him once again. Tomorrow morning, he would be woken by the alarm at 5 o'clock so that he could pay the owl that delivered the daily prophet. But was there any point continuing to take it? Harry merely glanced at the front page before throwing it aside these days. When the idiots who ran the paper finally realised that Voldemort was back, it would be headline news. And that was the only kind Harry cared about. If he was lucky, there would also be owls carrying letters from his best friends, Ron and Hermione. Though any expectation he'd had that their letters would bring him news had long since been dashed. We can't say much about you-know-what, obviously. We've been told not to say anything important in case our letters go astray. We're quite busy, but I can't give you details here. There's a fair amount going on. We'll tell you everything when we see you. But when were they going to see him? Nobody seemed too bothered with a precise date. Hermione had scribbled, I expect, "We'll be seeing you quite soon," inside his birthday card. But how soon was soon? How far as Harry could tell from the vague hints in their letters, Hermione and Ron were in the same place, presumably at Ron's parents' house. He could hardly bear to think of the pair of Ron's parents, of them having fun at the Burrow when he was stuck in Privet Drive. In fact, he was so angry with them, he had thrown away unopened 2 boxes of Honeydukes chocolates they'd sent him for the birthday. He'd regretted it later, after the wilted salad Aunt Petunia had provided for dinner that night. And what were Ron and Hermione busy with? Why wasn't Harry, busy? Hadn't he proved himself capable of handling much more than them? Had they all forgotten what he had done? Hadn't it been he who had entered that graveyard and watched Cedric being murdered, and being tied to that tombstone and nearly killed? Don't think about that, Harry. Harry told himself sternly for the 100th time that summer. It was bad enough that he kept revisiting graveyards in his nightmares, without dwelling on it in his waking moments too. He turned a corner into Magnolia Crescent. Halfway along, he passed the narrow alleyway down the side of the garage where he had first clapped eyes on his godfather, Sirius. At last, seemed to understand how Harry was feeling. Admittedly, his letters were just as empty of proper news as Ron and Hermione's, but at least they contained words of caution and consolation instead of tantalizing hints. I know this must be frustrating for you. Keep your nose clean and everything will be okay. Be careful and don't do anything rash. Well, thought Harry, as he crossed Magnolia Crescent, turned into Magnolia Road, and headed towards the darkening play park, he had, by and large, done as Sirius advised. He had at least resisted the temptation to tie his trunk to his broomstick and set off for the Burrow by himself. In fact, Harry thought his behaviour had been very good, considering how frustrated and angry he felt at being stuck in Privet Drive so long, reduced to hiding in flower beds, in the hope of hearing something that might point to what Lord Voldemort was doing. Nevertheless, it was quite galling to be told not to be rash by a man who had served 12 years in the wizard prison Azkaban, escaped, attempted to commit the murder he had been convicted for in the first place, then gone on the run with a stolen hippogriff, which Harry stole, by the way. But he's not saying that. He's too annoyed. He's too annoyed, but he didn't say that he stole the hippogriff. I know this must be frustrating for you. My goodness. Harry vaulted over the locked park gate and set off across the parched grass. The park was as empty as the surrounding streets. When he reached the swings, he sank onto the only one that Dudley and his friends had not yet managed to break, coiled one arm around the chain, and stared moodily at the ground. He would not be able to hide in the Dursleys' flower bed again. Tomorrow, he would have to think of some fresh way of listening to the news. In the meantime, he had nothing to look forward to but another restless, disturbed night, because even when he escaped the nightmares about Cedric, he had unsettling dreams about long dark corridors, all finishing in dead ends and locked doors, which he supposed had something to do with the trapped feeling he had when he was awake. Often, the old scar on his forehead prickled uncomfortably, but he did not fool himself that Ron or Hermione or Sirius would find that very interesting anymore. In the past, his scar hurting had warned that Voldemort was getting stronger again. But now that Voldemort was back, they would probably remind him that its regular irritation was only to be expected. Nothing to worry about. Old news. The injustice of it all welled up inside him so that he wanted to yell with fury. If it hadn't been for him, nobody would even have known Voldemort was back. And his reward was to be stuck in Little Whinging for 4 solid weeks, completely cut off from the magical world, reduced to squatting among dying begonias so that he could hear about water skiing budgerigars. How could Dumbledore have forgotten him so easily? Why had Ron and Hermione got together without inviting him along? How much longer was he supposed to endure Sirius telling him to sit tight and be a good boy, or resist the temptation to write to the stupid Daily Prophet and point out that Voldemort had returned? These furious thoughts whirled around in Harry's head, and his insides writhed with anger as a sultry, velvety night fell around him. The air full of the smell of warm, dry grass, and the only sound of the low grumble of traffic on the road behind the park railings. He did not know how long he had sat on the swing before the sound of voices interrupted his musings, and he looked up. The street lamps from the surrounding roads. Hang on, I'm just going to... Dean, I'm pretty sure I can put this back here. Okay, here we go. He did not know how long he had sat on the swing before the sound of voices interrupted his musings, and he looked up. The street lamps from the surrounding roads were casting a misty glow strong enough to silhouette a group of people making their way across the park. One of them was singing a loud, crude song. The others were laughing. The soft ticking noise came from several expensive racing bikes that they knew that they were wheeling along. Harry knew those people well. The figure in front was unmistakably his cousin, Dudley Dursley, wending his way home, accompanied by his faithful gang. Dudley was as vast as ever, but a year's hard dieting and the discovery of a new talent had wrought quite a change in his physique. As Uncle Vernon delightedly told anyone who would listen, Dudley had recently become the junior heavyweight inter-school boxing champion of the South East. A noble sport. I'm just going to put this up a bit. There we go. A noble sport, as Uncle Vernon called it, had made Dudley even more formidable than he had seemed to Harry in their primary school days, when he had served as Dudley's first punchball. Harry was not remotely afraid of his cousin anymore, but he still didn't think that Dudley, learning to punch harder and more accurately, was cause for celebration. Neighbourhood children all around were terrified of him, even more terrified than they were of that Potter boy, who, they had been warned, was a hardened criminal and attended St. Brutus's secure centre for incurably criminal boys. Harry watched the dark figures crossing the grass and wondered who they had been beating up tonight. Look round, Harry found himself thinking as he watched them. Come on, look round. I'm sitting here all alone. Come and have a go. If Dudley's friends saw him sitting here, they would be sure to make a beeline for him. And what would Dudley do then? He wouldn't want to lose face in front of the gang, but he'd be terrified of provoking Harry. It would be really fun to watch Dudley's dilemma, to taunt him, watch him, with him powerless to respond. And if any of the others tried hitting Harry, he was ready. He had his wand. Let them try. He'd love to vent some of his frustrations on the boys who had once made his life hell. But they didn't turn around. They didn't see him. They were almost at the railings. Harry mastered the impulse to call after them. Seeking a fight was not a smart move. He must not use magical. He must not use magic. He would be risking expulsion again. The voices of Dudley's gang died away. They were out of sight, heading along Magnolia Road. There you go, serious? Harry thought dully. Nothing rash, kept my nose clean, exactly the opposite of what you'd have done. He got to his feet and stretched. Aunt Petunia and Uncle Vernon seemed to feel that whenever Dudley turned up was the right time to be home. And any time after that was much too late. Uncle Vernon had threatened to lock Harry in the shed if he came home after Dudley ever again. So, stifling a yawn and still scowling, Harry set off towards the park gate. God, it's... I have intermediate, which is intermediate, which is segundo y tercero de secundaria in Spanish, which is form 2, 3. What is it? Form 2, 3, and 4. God, you might see some of my form 3s in a minute running over to me, trying to get onto getting onto my TikTok. God, here we go. My God, teaching intermediates. Two things, teaching intermediates and June. Oh my goodness. Oh my God, here we go.
Hey.
Hello.
Here's your favorite student.
Sometimes.
Sometimes. The order of the
When you're
famous.
not being annoying in the classroom.
I'm never annoying.
Okay, come on.
You're gonna. keep reading?
Now you're between classes.
I'm
Come on.
gonna ask for my phone so I can watch your live. Yes.
You do not
See you,
use
Steve.
your phone in the
See you,
classroom.
Steve.
Bye-bye.
Tell him
Otherwise-
that I need a 10 on this.
No, you
period.
don't. You
No,
don't.
yes, I need it. Bye.
You have to work for it. You have to work for a 10. In your dreams. Right. I just love that. The toing and froing. Ah, yeah, right, okay. Oh, and you want a 10, do you? What is a 10? What is a 10 in what's a 10 in the UK? Like a star. Aha, right. Okay. When we're looking at it, so looking at that perspective, okay. Magnolia, right? Here we go. Squealed like a pig, didn't he? Malcolm was saying to guffaws from the others. Nice right hook, Big D, said Piers. Same time tomorrow, said Dudley. Round at my place, my parents will be out, said Gordon. See you then, said Dudley. Bye, Dud. See you, Big D. Harry waited for the rest of the gang to move on before setting off again. When their voices had faded once more, he headed around the corner into Magnolia Crescent, and by walking very quickly, he soon came within hailing distance of Dudley, who was strolling along at his ease, humming tunelessly. Hey, Big D! Dudley turned. Oh, he grunted. It's you. How long have you been Big D then? Said Harry. Shut it, snarled Dudley, turning away. Cool name, said Harry, grinning and falling into sleep in the step beside his cousin. But you'll always be Icky Diddykins to me. I said shut it, said Dudley, whose ham-like hands had curled into fists. Don't the boys know that's what Mummy calls you? Shut your face. You don't tell her to shut her face. What about Popkin and Diddykums? Can I use them too? Dudley said nothing. The effort of keeping himself from hitting Harry seemed to demand all his self-control. So, who've you been beating up tonight? Asked Harry, his grin fading. Another 10-year-old? I know you did Mark Evans 2 nights ago. He was asking for it, snarled Dudley. Oh yeah? He cheeked me. Yeah? Did he say you look like a pig that's been taught to walk on his hind legs? 'Cause that's not cheek, Dud, that's true. A muscle was twitching in Dudley's jaw. It gave Harry enormous satisfaction to know how furious he was making Dudley. He felt as though he was siphoning off his own frustration into his cousin, the only outlet he had. Oh, that's mean. We could talk about why he's doing that. He turned right down the narrow alleyway where Harry... Did I remember? Yes, good. They turned right down the narrow alleyway where Harry had first seen Sirius, and which formed a shortcut between Magnolia Crescent and Wisteria Walk. It was empty and much darker than the streets it linked, because there were no street lamps. Their footsteps were muffled between garage walls on one side and a high fence on the other. Think you're a big man carrying that thing, don't you? Dudley said after a few seconds. What thing? That thing you're hiding. Harry grinned again. Not as stupid as you look, are you, Dud? But I suppose if you were, you wouldn't be able to walk and talk at the same time. Harry pulled out his wand. He saw Dudley look sideways at it. "You're not allowed," Dudley said at once. I know you're not. You'd get expelled from that freak school you go to." "How do you know they haven't changed the rules, Big D?" "They haven't," said Dudley, though he didn't sound completely convinced. Harry laughed softly. "You haven't got the guts to take me on without that thing, have you?" Dudley snarled. "Whereas you just need 4 mates behind you before you can beat up a 10-year-old. You know, the boxing title you keep banging on about. How old was that opponent? 7? 8? "He was 16, for your information," snarled Dudley, "and he was out cold for 20 minutes after I'd finished with him. And he was twice as heavy as..." "Is Ickle Barris frightened of a little wand?" From the little he could see of Dudley's large face, he was wearing a strangely triumphant look. "What do you mean, I'm not brave when I'm in bed?" said Harry, completely nonplussed. "What am I supposed to be frightened of? Pillows or something?" "I heard you last night," said Dudley, breathlessly, "talking in your sleep." "What do you mean?" Harry said again. But there was a cold, plunging sensation in his stomach. He had revisited the graveyard last night in his dreams. Dudley gave a harsh bark of laughter, then adopted a high-pitched whimpering voice. "Don't kill Cedric! Don't kill Cedric!" "Who's Cedric, your boyfriend?" "You're lying," said Harry automatically, but his mouth had gone dry. He knew Dudley wasn't lying. How else would he know about Cedric? "Dad, help me, Dad. He's going to kill me. Dad, boo-hoo." "Shut up," said Harry quietly. "Shut up, Dudley. I'm warning you. Come and help me. Dad, come. Mum, come and help me. He's killed Cedric. Dad, help me. He's going to..." "Don't you point that thing at me." Dudley backed into the alleyway. Harry was pointing the wand directly at Dudley's heart. Harry could feel 14 years' hatred of Dudley pounding in his veins. What wouldn't he give to strike now to jinx Dudley so thoroughly he'd have to crawl home like an insect, struck dumb, spouting feelers. "Don't ever talk about that again," Harry snarled. "Do you understand me? Point that thing somewhere else. I said, do you understand me? Point it somewhere else. Do you understand me? Get that thing away from..." Dudley gave an odd, shuddering grasp, as though he had been doused in icy water. Something had happened to the night. The star-strewn indigo sky was suddenly pitch black and lightless. The stars, the moon, the misty street lamps at either end of the alley had vanished. The distant rumble of cars and the whisper of trees had gone. The balmy evening was suddenly piercingly bright, bitingly cold. They were surrounded by total, impenetrable, silent darkness, as though some giant had dropped a thick, icy mantle over the entire alleyway, blinding them. For a split second, Harry thought he had done magic without meaning to, despite the fact that he'd been resisting as hard as he could. Then his reason caught up with his senses. He didn't have the power to turn off the stars. He turned his head this way and that, trying to see something, but the darkness pressed on his eyes like a weightless veil. Dudley's terrified voice broke in Harry's ear. "What are you doing? Stop it! I'm not doing anything. Shut up and don't move. I can't see. I've gone blind. I said shut up." Harry stood stock still, turning his sightless eyes left and right. The cold was so intense he was shivering all over. Goosebumps had erupted up his arms, and the hairs on the back of his neck were standing up. He opened his eyes to the fullest extent, staring blankly around, unseeing. It was impossible. They couldn't be here, not in Little Whinging. He strained his ears. He would hear them before he saw them. I'll tell Dad," Dudley whimpered. "Where are you? What are you do? Will you shut up?" Harry hissed. "I'm trying to listen." But he fell silent. He had heard just the thing he had been dreading. There was something in the alleyway apart from themselves. Something that was drawing long, hoarse, rattling breaths. Harry felt a horrible jolt of dread as he stood trembling in the freezing air. "Cut it out! Stop doing it! I'll hit you, I swear I will!" "Dudley, shut!" Wham! A fist made contact with the side of Harry's head, lifting him off his feet. Small white lights popped in front of his eyes. For the second time in an hour, Harry felt as though his head had been cleaved in two. Next moment, he had landed hard on the ground, and his wand had flown out of his hand. "You moron, Dudley!" Harry yelled, his eyes watering with pain as he scrambled to his hands and knees, feeling around frantically in the blackness. He heard Dudley blundering away, hitting the alley fence, stumbling. "Dudley, come back! You're running right at it!" There was a horrible squealing yell, and Dudley's footsteps stopped. At the same moment, Harry felt a creeping chill behind him that could mean only one thing. There was more than one. "Dudley, keep your mouth shut. Whatever you do, keep your mouth shut." "Wand," Harry muttered frantically, his hands flying over the ground like spiders. "Where's wand? Come on. Loomis." He said the spell automatically, desperate for light to help him in his search, and to his disbelieving relief, light flared inches from his right hand. The wand tip had ignited. Harry snatched it up, scrambled to his feet, and turned around. His stomach turned over. A towering, hooded figure was gliding smoothly towards him, hovering over the ground, no feet or face visible beneath its robes, sucking on the night as it came. Stumbling backwards, Harry raised his wand. Expecto Patronum! A silvery wisp of vapour shot from the tip of the wand, and the Dementor slowed. But the spell hadn't worked properly, tripping over his own feet. Harry retreated further as the Dementor bore down upon him, panic fogging his brain. Concentrate. A pair of grey, slimy, scabbed hands slid from inside the Dementor's robes, reaching for him. A rushing noise filled Harry's ears. Expecto Patronum! His voice sounded dim and distant. Another wisp of silver smoke, feebler than the last, drifted from the wand. He couldn't do it anymore. He couldn't work the spell. There was laughter inside his own head, shrill, high-pitched laughter. He could smell the Dementor's putrid, death-cold breath, filling his own lungs, drowning him. Think! Something happy. But there was no happiness in him. The Dementor's icy fingers were closing on his throat. The high-pitched laughter was growing louder and louder, and a voice spoke inside his head. Bow to death, Harry. It might even be painless. I would not know. I have never died. He was never going to see Ron and Hermione again, and their faces burst clearly into his mind as he fought for breath. Expecto Patronum! An enormous silver stag erupted from the tip of Harry's wand. Its antlers caught the Dementor in the place where the heart should have been. It was thrown backwards, weightless and darkness, and the stag charged. The Dementor swooped away, bat-like and defeated. This way, Harry shouted at the stag, wheeling around. He sprinted down the alleyway, holding the little wand aloft. Dudley! Dudley! He had run barely a dozen steps when he reached them. Dudley was curled up on the ground, his arms clamped over his face. A second Dementor was crouching low over him, gripping his wrists in its slimy hands, prizing them slowly, almost lovingly apart, lowering its hooded head towards Dudley's face, as though about to kiss him. Get it! Harry bellowed, and with a rushing, roaring sound, the silver stag he had conjured came galloping past him. The Dementor's eyeless face was barely an inch from Dudley's when the silver antlers caught it. The thing was thrown up into the air, and like its fellows, it soared away and was absorbed into the darkness. The stag cantered to the end of the alleyway and dissolved into silver mist. Moon, stars, and street lamps burst back into life. A warm breeze swept the alleyway. Trees rustled in neighbouring gardens, and the mundane rumble of cars in Magnolia Crescent filled the air again. Harry stood quite still, all his senses vibrating, taking in the abrupt return to normality. After a moment, he became aware that his t-shirt was sticking to him. He was drenched in sweat. He could not believe what had just happened. Dementors here in Little Whinging. Dudley lay curled up on the ground, whimpering and shaking. Harry bent down to see whether he was in a fit state to stand up. But then he heard loud running footsteps behind him. Instinctively, raising his wand again, he span on his heel to face the newcomer. Mrs. Figg, their batty old neighbour, came panting into sight. Her grizzled grey hair was escaping from its hairnet. A clanking string shopping bag was swinging from her wrist, and her feet were halfway out of the tartan carpet slippers. Harry made to stow his wand hurriedly out of sight, but... "Don't put it away! Don't put it away, idiot boy!" she shrieked. "What if there are more of them around? I'm going to kill Mundungus Fletcher." Chapter 2. A Peck of Owls. What? said Harry blankly. He left, said Miss Fig, wringing her hands. Left to see somebody about a batch of cauldrons that fell off the back of a broom. I told him I'd lay him alive if he went. And now look, Dementors. It's just lucky I put Mr. Tibbles on the case. But we haven't got time to stand around. Hurry now. We've got to get you back. Oh, the trouble this is going to cause. I will kill him. But the revelation that his batty old cat-obsessed neighbour knew what Dementors were was almost as big a shock to Harry as meeting two of them down the alleyway. You're a witch. I'm a squib, as Mundungus knows full well. So how on earth was I supposed to help you fight off Dementors? He left you as completely without cover when I had warned him. This Mundungus has been following me? Hang on, it was him? He disapparated from the front of my house. Yes. But luckily, I'd stationed Mr. Tibbles under the car just in case, and Mr. Tibbles came and warned me. But by the time I got to your house, you'd gone. And now, oh, what's Dumbledore going to say? You, she shrieked at Dudley, still supine on the alley floor. Get your fat bottom off the ground, quick. You know Dumbledore? Said Harry, staring at her. Of course I know Dumbledore. Who doesn't know Dumbledore? But come on. I'll be no help if they come back. I've never so much as transfigured a tea bag. She stooped down, seized one of Dudley's massive arms in her wizened hands, and tugged. Get up, you useless lump. Get up. Could not or would not move. He remained on the ground, trembling, ashen-faced, his mouth shut very tight. I'll do it. Harry took hold of Dudley's arm and heaved. With an enormous effort, he managed to hoist him to his feet. Dudley seemed to be on the point of fainting. His small eyes were rolling in their sockets, and sweat was beading his face. The moment Harry let go of him, he swayed dangerously. Hurry up, said Mrs. Fig hysterically. Harry pulled one of Dudley's massive arms around his own shoulders and dragged him towards the road, sagging slightly under the weight. Mrs. Fig tottered along in front of them, peering anxiously around the corner. Keep your wand out, she told Harry, as they entered Wisteria Walk. Never mind the statue of secrecy now. There's going to be hell to play anyway. We might as well be hanged for a dragon as an egg. Talk about reasonable restriction of underage sorcery. This was exactly what Dumbledore was afraid of. What's that at the end of the street? Oh, it's just Mr. Prentice. Don't put your wand away, boy. Don't. I keep telling you I'm no use. It was not easy to hold a wand steady and haul Dudley along at the same time. Harry gave his cousin an impatient dig in the ribs, but Dudley seemed to have lost all desire for independent movement. He was slumped on Harry's shoulder, his large feet dragging along the ground. Why didn't you tell me you're a squib, Mrs. Fig? Asked Harry, panting with the effort to keep walking. All those times I came round your house, why didn't you say anything? Dumbledore's orders. I was to keep an eye on you, but not say anything. You were too young. I'm sorry, I gave you such a miserable time, Harry, but the Dursleys would never have let you come. Hang on, I'm just doing my charger. Doing my charge a bit. There we go, good. Now I'm not going to run out of charge. There we go. Welcome. Okay, here we go. Now we continue. Dumbledore's orders. I was to keep an eye on you, but not say anything. You were too young. I'm sorry I gave you such a miserable time, Harry, but the Dursleys would never have let you come if they'd thought you enjoyed it. It wasn't easy, you know. But, oh my word, she said tragically, wringing her hands once more, when Dumbledore hears about this, how could Mundungus have left? He was supposed to be on duty until midnight. Where is he? How am I going to tell Dumbledore what's happened? I can't apparate. I've got an owl. You can borrow her, Harry groaned, wondering whether his spine was going to snap under Dudley's weight. Harry, you don't understand. Dumbledore will need to act as quickly as possible. The Ministry have their own ways of detecting underage magic. They'll know already, you mark my words. But I was getting rid of Dementors. I had to use magic. They're going to be more worried about the Dementors we're doing floating around Wisteria Walk. Surely. Oh, my dear. I wish it was so. But I'm afraid, Mundungus Fletcher, I am going to kill you. There was a loud crack, and a strong smell of drink mingled with stale tobacco filled the air as a squat, unshaven man in tattered legs, long, straggly ginger head, and bloodshot, baggy eyes that gave him the doleful look of a basset hound. He was also clutching a silvery bundle that Harry recognised at once as an invisibility cloak. "Sup, Figgy?" he said, staring from Mrs. Fig to Harry and Dudley. "What happened to staying under cover?" "I'll give you under cover," cried Mrs. Fig. "Dementors, you useless, skiving sneak thief." "Dementors?" repeated Mundungus, aghast. "Dementors, here." "Yes, here, you useless pile of bat droppings, here," shrieked Mrs. Fig. "Dementors attacking the boy on your watch." "Blimey," said Mundungus weakly, looking from Mrs. Fig to Harry and back again. "Blimey, aye." And there I'm going to leave it for today. Okay, now, tomorrow you'll be happy to know I will be here at 8 o'clock. Tomorrow I'll be here at 8 o'clock in the morning to do the next reading of Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. I am also going to be reading this in the morning for the rest of the academic year. I am going to be teaching intermediate until, my goodness, until early July. Okay, I have Form 1, Form 2, and Form 3. Okay, and so hello, hola, ¿qué tal? I'll be teaching until early July. And so what will happen is that every day at 8 o'clock, I will be here reading Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, and I'm going to see how much I can get through. But we've had an interesting experience today. Why? Oh my goodness! Because because there are Dementors. There were Dementors in Little Whinging, where Harry's aunt and uncle lived. Okay, and that is deeply troubling. And Dumbledore will see it as a terrible sign. Okay, so one thing we're going to do is we're going to pick it up tomorrow. Thank you very much, and I'll see you very, very soon. Tonight I'm going to be starting at 7:30. And what am I reading tonight? Very, very interesting. Today I'm starting the Order of the Phoenix in the morning, and in the evening I'm reading Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. Okay, the last of the Harry Potter series, and that is at 7:30 tonight. Okay, so in 10 hours. Yes, in 10 hours I will be back on TikTok reading the first chapter of Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. Excellent, take care, and I'll see you very soon. Take care, guys. See you tonight, might be. Adios, bye.